Lords, I rise with pleasure to follow the Noble Lord Wallace and the Noble Lady Baroness Lister, and to speak for Amendments 137 and 138, to which I've attached my name. And like the Noble Lady Baroness Lister, I'm sorry that we haven't heard from the Noble Lord Holmes of Richmond yet to hear his case, but I do oppose 143 on the basis that it assumes that contribution to society can somehow be measured by income, when in fact we know many of the people who contribute most to our society, whether they be carers, and there are many young carers in our society, or people involved in a community, are huge parts of their community without receiving any income for that. However, I will speak chiefly to 137 and 138. And I think the Noble Lord Wallace, in introducing this, reflected on the previous group being very English in its debates. And indeed, of course, that's particularly relevant to this group, where Scotland and Wales have votes at 16, the former having had it since 2015, with, I note, full cross-party support, including the enthusiastic support from the former Scottish Tory leader and now member of your Lordship's House, Baroness Davidson. And it's a pity perhaps she's not with us today, and I might hope that she might join us to share her thoughts on this at report stage, because I think that would be interesting and informative. Because the success of the policy north of the English border has been very obvious, with very high turnout among 16 and 17-year-olds, higher turnout than 18 to 24-year-olds, 75% voting and 97% saying they would vote in future elections. And it's also worth noting that research shows that they got their information from a wider range of sources than does voters of older age groups. And we know there's very strong evidence that people who vote in their first possible election are far more likely to keep voting. So what we actually have is lost generations or generations, people who haven't voted in their first election. And if we had votes at 16 and 17, when we can see from the Scott example people are more likely to vote, they're also more likely to keep voting. Now, I often speak to young people in formal and informal settings, and I will here insert a little advert for members of your Lordship's House who aren't involved in it for the Learn with the Lords programme, which is a really great way to actually have contact with young people from a wide range of audiences. And also, of course, I speak a great deal to climate strikers. And I find that 16-year-olds are on average as informed about politics as 60-year-olds, and perhaps on average rather more so. Which isn't, of course, to say, and I very much endorse the remarks of the Noble Lady Baroness Lister, that all of society wouldn't benefit from a great deal more political education and understanding. Now, it's long been Green Party policy to have votes at 16, and yes, perhaps I should declare an interest that it would certainly be of benefit to our vote to have them. Thinking long-term is a core part of our political philosophy, and for young people, the long-term is much more personal than it is for their parents and their grandparents. It's their life. But that's not why we want votes at 16. We want it, as do many others, because our current political structures are tottering, unstable, dangerously undemocratic. And votes at 16, while no panacea, would be a positive step forward. And the historical view, I think, is very useful here. The average age of voters in 2019 in our fast-ageing population, with a much lower turnout of that younger 18 to 24 group, is higher than it's ever been before, and less representative of the actual population than it's ever been before, because, of course, we're seeing many European residents who are losing their right to vote in local elections. There's also a huge ideological gap between generations, reflecting different life experiences and far higher levels of education in younger age groups. A 16-year-old or a 17-year-old is an expert on being a 16 and 17-year-old in the way that no one in your Lordship's House possibly can be. And I think the voting age also feeds into the age of our parliamentary representation, at least in the other place. If you look to continental Europe, and the parliaments are frequently far younger, and in model democratic states such as the Scandinavians, ministers in their 20s and 30s, and no cause for particular comment, reflecting a different kind of political culture that votes at 16 could help to bring in. And I'm somewhat surprised and pleased to learn that the noble Lady Baroness Lister has actually preempted quoting David Runciman and that research. I was also going to suggest votes at 6. She's stolen my thunder, but I think it's something we might have a chat about later. But seriously, I have met some very smart, politically engaged 9- and 10-year-olds, and they've asked some of the most pointed, difficult-to-answer questions of any people I have ever encountered. They very often ask, why are things this way? Why aren't they different? From a perspective that I believe is very valuable. And finally, my lords, the noble Lord Wallace said he introduced this as a probing amendment, but I'd put a proposition to your lordship's house. Our membership has an average age of 71. Wouldn't it be such a gift for us to put votes at 16 into the election bill?